used to do. I don't do no more things I used to do. I don't do no more, for the Lord's made a change in me.
This is going to be a complete non sequitur segue away from Brownstone for a moment.
Okay. Yep.
But
Back to hair?
it's no, we were talking about hair before we started. Whoa. We were talking about hair before we started recording, and I said that your hair looked great.
And I said yours did too.
Nice and curly. We did the girl thing.
Yeah, we did the girl thing. Yeah.
No, I just learned of someone who has been deceased since 2012. And if there are people who've been following Agenda 21 really, really closely, or Agenda 2030, or Agenda for the 21st Century, whatever you want to call it, this UN program, and we can see it now with the Sustainable Development Goals and all that. So if you followed that, then you might know the name Henry Lamb. I did not.
I don't know that. Yeah.
Rosa Corey, who's also passed away, was one who spoke a lot. She was in California, and she passed away, and she kind of exposed a lot of what Agenda 21 meant in terms of private property or so. Just so happened that I stumbled on a video. Somebody sent me a video, or I saw it on one of the social media platforms, that he had done probably back in 1995 or 1996, Henry Lamb. And he was really informed about what this meant to private property. And he was talking about a lot of the same things that Alan Watt talked about with Maurice Strong and the UN and so forth, but he just really did this blistering thing. He was speaking at a panel. Well, I thought, wow, I can't believe I never heard of him. And so I started digging around, and I read a couple of articles that he'd written. But like I say, it's been gone since 2012. I stumbled on a paper, a white paper, that was written, don't remember the name now. It might have been Thomas Vernon, or anyway, he wrote it for the State Department and the various heads of the National Parks Organization. So it was a real high level white paper. And he wrote it in 2016 about man and biosphere, which is called MAB.
Oh, I'd like to read that. Send it.
Yeah, I will send it to you. Man and Biosphere reports that he wanted everybody to get on, let's all get on the same page here. Basically, in about 65 pages of this white paper, he was telling his high-level community, Henry Lamb has been gone for 4 years now, and he did a lot of damage to our initiatives. So we need to regroup and think how we can go forward. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, that's what one man can do. One man who had a cause. The UN is determined to get rid of private property. The United Nations does not want you to have private property. It's okay if you own it, but you can't use it unless they give you the
pro or anti that agenda. Was he an insider?
He was anti the agenda.
Okay.
He was a, he called himself a true conservationist, but he was also freedom loving, private property, so he was saying, he was speaking to the green religion, which Alan has talked about, for ages. And so it was, he did a lot of work exposing this. But what I'm saying is that one man slowed down this MAB, the Man and Biosphere movement, to basically take control of private property. Now, what do we see? And Meryl Nass pointed this out at your Brownstone talk, was absolutely the fact that there is this move to take away all of your rights, including private property, and that the organizer, or the main, head of the Hydra here is is the United Nations.
Mm,
But I can maybe sometimes sound cynical, like, oh, what's the point, or don't vote. I mean, I think that there is a way for individuals to make a huge difference, whether they are a trucker who is willing to strike and call attention to it, or same thing with a farmer who's, so it's not a class thing. If
mm.
it's an academic who happens to have the hand on the levers of power, one man or one woman can make an enormous difference, because
Yeah.
there's Henry Lamb, slows down a UN agenda
Mm,
for years.
mm. And that's where
Years.
having people differently placed is really important in any, if we accept that we're in, whether you use David Hughes's term, omni-war or fifth generation warfare, which you and I accept we're in something like that, yeah, where we no longer, actually, interestingly, I heard one of the Eastern European prime ministers say he couldn't interpret Western leaders anymore because they're against the interests of their own populations. So they were having to use other interpretive understandings of what their motivations were. And I found it might have been Orban. I found it really powerful because it was just stated really clearly. He said, I can work out what Putin's saying, even if there's layers, or Xi Jinping, but I can't work out what the Western leaders are saying, because they're almost always doing things that are undermining their own populations. And I think that's what we're actually living in, which is so bamboozling. Why are we living in a situation where our own political apparatus is oppressing us to this degree, to the degree where we can just be completely shut down and where nothing actually works, even with people who are more sort of on board with the agenda? If you point out that over 20 years, you can't get a person on the phone, you can't, everything is like absolute red tape. And now some people would say, oh, that's just the consequences of hyper-rationalism. But I just see that literally nothing works for people, at multiple levels. And we're just getting more and more surveillance and more control and less power and less capacity. Like you say, that they're preventing the next generation from owning property. We might own property, we just can't do anything with it. Like, and the taxes going up and up and up, like, we've talked about with the rates. Like, so I think that we're in an omni-war, and I think, to use David Hughes's excellent term, and I think that means that we actually need people at all levels. And so, like you say, was Henry Lamb, that he was able to stall an agenda because he was in the belly of the beast. In a way, what the brownstone people like Tom Harrington, who's just written a book, The Treason of the Experts, and he's an erudite man, really fantastic. He was a philosopher and or a cultural theorist of Spanish cultures. And so this is the interesting thing, like my background's motherhood, but we were talking a bit just towards the end about being on a similar kind of wavelength in terms of social theories to understand this. So you're having people come from very different disciplinary backgrounds coming to the same conclusion, like David Hughes. I don't know what his background is. He's a geographer, is he, or what was his background?
He had two PhDs, Duke University PhD in German history and
German history.
Oxford International Relations. And just a funny little aside here, speaking of UN and or high level prominently placed individual control. In this case, it was Rockefeller. The Rockefeller Foundation started the whole discipline of international relations. And he had been digging.
I saw
he found this out.
Yes. It's extraordinary. I think it's in his book. I think it might be in his book.
He said, academia, you have to look. I told him to go read the book Foundations, Their Power and Influence, and it would really open his eyes on how academia had been, gotten into decades ago and kind of steered in a different direction. But yeah, so I think, and I know people who have I just did a real history with a woman, Sierra Ham, who is doing this clean, initiative, helping people donate and bank directed donations of and
fantastic.
Yeah, and she's done things as in her local political community as an elected local, small town local, trying to bring attention to AI surveillance in her area. So it's the political theater and waiting for the hero. If we're waiting, see, this is the problem that in a nutshell with politics is that people are voting and then hoping that their man or their woman is going to fix everything and, kiss the boo-boo and put the band-aid on it. And all of us in our way have to figure out how to champion for our rights and our freedom of speech and our right to say what does or doesn't go in our body. We
I agree with
cannot
you
wait for an elected official to do
And
that.
they're too far removed. Like it might have worked when we were at the polis level, but they're so far removed. They're actually our representatives. They're not, we're not electing people who are, one step, two step, or even five steps removed. They're on another planet, these people, whether it's, how they actually live in their finances. I mean, look at them. They're all absolutely millionaires and billionaires. And, they don't really speak for the working man, despite being the apex of the populist movement. So, there's all that as well. I think I guess my deeper point is that there's room for the whole spectrum of people, including people who kind of realize and wake up ethically. And I think that's what you see with people like myself or David, who were in the system and then kind of having a realization around or earlier and not wanting to be anymore, like Pat, the doctor, going this allopathic medicine system. And something, I think I said it, I'd had like 3 hours sleep, which was brutal. Despite staggering my trip, I still was really tired on that panel, but I just channeled something. But I don't know if I said it there, but it looks to me like many of the people who spoke up already had a realization about the system being against health or against well-being or against liberty or against the family or against something fundamental before COVID. I noticed that, like a lot of people were already black sheep. I think I said that, but at any rate,
you did.
I think, and I think that that's interesting too. It's almost like we see people now waking up. It sounds a bit cultish, but who through have woken up. But many of us who were able to see through the actually already, like for me, it was around home birth. I saw that, I think we talked about this before, but I saw that the best way to have a baby was the way that was stopped. And I think that there are massive implications for that, actually, because it can set a woman up for life in myriad ways in terms of her health, her body, her psyche, her sexuality, and it's undermined and controlled. And a lot of women come out of birth, like an alarming number of women come out of childbirth feeling that they've been raped or violated. And I think, so that's just one area, but like I know other people have had it with cancer. They go through the standard protocol treatment and discover it makes them sicker and worse, and that even if they want to do some chemo, they'd also like to do functional medicine and find that they can't afford it or it's literally outlawed. And so, we see this, and that's just two areas, but there's many other areas too where actually doing what might be best. I mean, that's what Elizabeth Nixon's work found with the Green Movement. She her work is really interesting in this regard, in how the movement often undermines nature by destroying the very interconnected systems. Like that, there was that forester who discovered by removing the predators, they destroyed the forest, and it was do-gooders who removed the wolves, this kind of thing. So we have this mechanistic approach through every area of life, and many people who haven't given over their integrity. So I think what distinguishes the Brownstone Fellows, and of course everybody's different, and I'm not saying there aren't any bad apples there, but I'm just saying that what distinguished the people I met and listened to and spoke to, and certainly Jeffrey, who's really a shining light, is integrity. Integrity. That's why they said, no, these mandates are wrong. People should have freedom of choice, and this is experimental, and it doesn't even stop transmission, and all the stuff. I don't need to rehearse that, but they just had the integrity to say no to that. And that is a defining feature. Just to go back to the conference, what I saw was that was a defining feature.